Hola, buenos días a todos.
A very good morning to you all. The total volume of premium in Latin America was 166 million approximately, which is about 3.5% of the total premium in the world. This has been significantly increasing and sustainable increasing over time, which confirms how powerful it is the future for this region. Now we are lucky today to have three leading companies that contribute to this growth. Let us begin. To my left, to your left actually, we have Guillermo. Guillermo represents Avianca. Then we have Gianfranco Truffello, represents Arauco, is a leading company in Chile. And then we have Ricardo Razzori, who represents Grupo Mexico, which is a leading company in Mexico. Let us begin this roundtable by telling a few things about our speakers and the companies they represent, and then on we will begin with our questions. Guillermo Pardo represents Avianca, as I said. Avianca is a transport passenger company, also for goods, and they also have a loyalty program, and they do activities such as engineering, specialized services, and tourism. This passenger transport has a fleet of over 180 planes. It has 125 countries, it's present there, and it has over 6,000 planes trips leaving each week. It's 80% of the revenue of this Avianca holding. It also has 100 destinations for planes. Its reference in Bogota is one of the main players for the International Miami Airport. Guillermo is an architect by training by the Javeriana University, and he has also studied strategy in the Savannah University in Brazil. He has got studies, for instance, in risk management and business. Since December 2017, he is the General Director for Integral Security, Risk and Compliance for Avianca Holdings. Before, he was the Safety Director for Civil Aviation and Corporate Aviation. All along his trajectory for over 16 years in the aeronautics sector, he has implemented strategic projects that have to do with compliance, safety, and risk management that entail organizational risk changes. Thank you, Guillermo, for being with us today. Gianfranco Truffello represents Arauco, which is a global company, diversified portfolio, present in the forestry, cellulose, wood, panels, and renewable and clean energy sector. It has a wide portfolio of quality products for different types of industries, like, for instance, packaging and energy. Now it has presence in 11 countries like Chile, Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, the US, Canada, Mexico, and some other countries in Europe. And it has 47 sites. It has over 8 million hectares in South America, more than 4,000 staff, and more than 5 million clients in the 5 continents. It's the second producer at world level for cellulose and panels. It's among the top 10 producers of cut wood at world level. Thank you, Gianfranco, for being here. Ricardo Razzori represents Grupo Mexico, which is a leading copper company, train and infrastructure transport. Over 10 years of experience of this company has made it a leading company at the technologic avant-garde, which is one of the main economic partners in Latin America. It works in Spain, Mexico, Peru, and the US, and it has projects in Ecuador and Chile, among others. American Mining Corporation is the corporation that holds the mining operations of the group. It's a leading company for copper at world level. It represents 75% of the sales of the group. Among its activity, we have exploitation and obtention of mineral metals and some byproducts that are commercialized in different markets and industrial sectors in the world. It has 15 mining sites, 52 melting and other different plants, and is the first copper producer for Mexico and Peru, third in the US and third at world level. It has around 80% growth forecast for 2025. Ricardo is an industrial engineer by the University of Lima and MBA by the University of Melbourne in Australia. Ricardo, since 2016, is a corporate risk manager, for the Mexican division of the company, and he is now in charge of risk transfer and management in Peru, Mexico, and Spain, among others. The volume of premium administered by the company is over $80 million, and for the three divisions of Mexico Group is over $100 million. The assets, in short, are over $30 million. So we have three very important speakers that represent very important economies for LATAM Group. So the first question for the group would be this: what is the economic situation of the group and of the countries that you really work on, which are Chile, Colombia, and Mexico? Guillermo, maybe you want to begin? A very good morning to you all. Thank you for your invite. It's very interesting to be here today. What can I say about Colombia? We've been going through a challenging situation. We have over 40 million inhabitants, and we have a forecasted growth of 3.54% for 2020, but our first quarter of the year closed with 2.8 growth, that is under what was forecasted. The rating agencies, they give us a stable prospect for this year. However, we have some challenging issues like fiscal or taxing issues for the next year. For those of you who do not know Colombia well, we're going through an implementing process of a peace process, which in the end will have some repercussions at the economic scene. And we have some corruption issues that I believe are critical, and we've been working with that as a country. In geopolitical terms, we have a specific situation. Our relationship with Venezuela, for instance, has affected the economic issue and the political one because it has created some wavering situation. With regard to aviation industry, we also have a very specific and particular scenario. Petrol prices have increased, and also we've seen that the market representative tax has arrived to peaks, history peaks in 2016. So the situation is very challenging for Colombia and for the aviation industry even more. Thank you. Gianfranco next. Also, thank you for inviting me to this conference, and thank you last night for making an effort even though it was raining. People were really dedicated, and things are going very well. With regard to Chile, I could say that the economy is stable, is recognized among South America with good GDP, one of the best ratings. It has solid institutions, and if you look at the country from the outside, we could say that things are relatively well. Unemployment is 6.5%, the inflation is contained, 3.2%, the tax regime is very healthy, but the growth has been what was underestimated, around 3%, and people had different expectations. They thought that we were going to grow more. We had an alternance between the right and the left in the government, and it was very peculiar. We had Bachelet 1, Piñera 1, and then we had Bachelet and Piñera Jr., so to speak. Because it was the second government, and the last time of Bachelet was a growth of 5%. Then when Piñera came again, he was from the right side, and people thought that Chile would grow more, and it did. It grew a bit over 5%. Because of the different expectations of the government, things changed a bit. But now, in 2019, growth is only 3%. Popularity has fell of Piñera, and he has had many problems to pass his reforms, like pension reforms, because he had no support in Congress, among others. So things have stagnated a little bit. The consumption as well has fallen, and Chile is a very open economy. It is very much exposed to what's happening in the world, for instance, in Asia. And the trade conflict between China and the US has had an impact. For instance, the problem with copper, problems with cellulose. That has meant that our expectations for these years are going to be harder. My company, Arauco, has 70% of its assets in Chile, but we sell less than 10% in Chile. Cellulose is a world market, so we sell outside. And now we're concerned with the weight price of cellulose in China. It has fallen a lot. Thank you. Ricardo, can you tell us about the situation in Mexico? Good morning. Thank you. After listening to my colleagues, I think that the situation is similar in my country. We are expecting what's going to happen. The general situation in Mexico is a little bit more difficult. There is a change in government in December last year. The economy grew last year 2% rate under what was forecasted, and now we're forecasting less than 2% per year. Rating agencies have lowered the rating of the country, and there are some other elements, like, for instance, the uncertainty of the economic policies created by the changing government, and also some populist decisions by the part of the government. That has meant that investors are expecting to see what's going to happen in the future. Also, there is a reduction in the production of petrol, also a reduction in the internal spending. And so that meant that now even though in past years we had a very big economy, very stable one, now things are looking down a bit. As a group, Mexico group, that is affecting us a lot for the worse, because we are very much exposed, because of the mining industry, to this type of decision. So we're going to see what's going to happen with licenses for mining. There have been many threats during the presidential campaign, because we were told that they would revisit these type of permits, and that would make us be in jeopardy. We have increased our portfolio given this situation. We are investing a lot more in other countries, like in Peru. We have $8 billion in project for the next 3 years in Peru alone. But Peru is not safe either from this uncertainty, which is similar to the one in Mexico, where we see that it will be very complicated to have our projects passed. I would say that this next year is going to be an interesting one, and we will see how economic decisions will be implemented. And once we see this, we will shed more light on how things will go in Mexico. Thank you. Next, I would like to talk about the insurance market. The global risk market, for us, is very international, very global, very uniform and similar in all countries, but that's not the case. And it really depends on the local peculiarities of each country. So I would like for each of you to tell us a little bit about what are these particularities of each country, and what are the main events that have happened in the past year. Guillermo, you go next first.
Well, if we look at the figures of the market, we can see there's been a growth in terms of the issued premiums, 6%. But when we look at the penetration index, so premiums over the GDP is 2.82%. So we are considered to be an intermediate growth country. We are the medium level in the ranking. So we could do better. There are countries such as Chile, Brazil that are above us, and others such as Mexico and Peru that are on the same part of the scale. So if we look at our company, for example, we have identified certain risks and trends, for example, security, safety, environmental risks that are new to us. They were not important in the past, and we as an organization are exploring with our insurance companies the alternatives that we can find so that we can handle these new risks well in aviation, environment, carbon emissions. This is a challenging time and we're looking for alternatives. Cyber security is also a big risk, a big concern, and we are looking for alternatives the market can offer to us. Gianfranco? Well, Chile is a well-developed country in terms of insurances in Latin America because of the GDP per capita, and there are several insurance companies that share the market worth $4 billion. Last year, the growth was 7%. And I think the features of Chile is that, well, we have a lot of catastrophe risks. We're famous because of earthquakes, In Valdivia in 1960, we had an earthquake 9.2 at the Richter scale and 8.7 a few years ago. We have volcanoes, we have flooding, we have fires. And last week, we have a tornado, something that had never been seen in Chile for 200 years. So we have a whole array of natural catastrophes in Chile. So, well, we have a lot of insurance companies that can cover for all that. Our industry, especially the mining industry, also need insurances from abroad because of the coverage. So we have to look for international insurances, but the basis for our economy is the catastrophe risk. In Mexico, the main feature is that we have a portion of natural catastrophes, especially hurricanes and earthquakes, and we are focused on the manufacturing, production, and industry and the tourist industry, because we have many hotels along the coast that are really exposed. And we have many players in the markets, both insurance companies, intermediaries, consultants and brokers, but we still have room for growth. The penetration of insurance in Mexico is around 2%. So for us, big industry, we don't have many local capabilities, so we have international insurances, and we are very much influenced by the international markets outside of the United States, so non-US related, more the European markets. And we are now witnessing a harshening of the conditions also locally after the latest events.
Vamos ahora a tocar el tema de gerencia de riesgos.
What about risk management? You are risk managers in very big companies, important companies, so I'd like to know, what is the big challenge you face? What really worries you, and how you handle your work when you try to imbue your companies with the risk management culture? So the big concerns in risk management, for me, the way I see it, at least, are linked to the insurance culture or the risk management culture. And the culture goes hand in hand with the insurance culture as a whole, because as we know, insurance are one of the choices we have when handling the risk. We can mitigate it, we can handle it, or we can transfer it. And the big organization that I work for at least wants to make sure we all understand that insurance management goes beyond just negotiating a premium, because insurance means handling the risk well. And the organization has to close the learning loop that you generate when you mitigate the situation. So when we have a situation and loss that affects our premium, is a premium, is an event that becomes true, that comes true, that becomes a reality, that materializes and that affects the organization. And sometimes we find an organization that doesn't recognize, that doesn't acknowledge that risk handling is important at all levels. And some people who don't understand that it is their responsibility to handle the risks. And that is a challenge, because we have to change the mindset of the people. We have to change it from thinking that risks are a problem of managers or the risk handlers or the risk managers, towards a thinking where everybody feels it is their responsibility, the responsibility of everybody to control the risks and handle them, so that all processes become safer. So this is the real challenge, how to empower the first defense line, people who are at the front end of the operations, people who make decisions, people who handle their processes, how to really make them understand that they have to do it responsibly, safely, and in compliance, and by handling the risks adequately. So that is the big challenge. And in the end, the whole plan is based on culture. How to change the mindset, the behavior of the people who are part of the organization. Looks simple, but it takes time. That's what we're doing. Thank you. Well, I would say that risk is difficult. It is a very harsh topic to talk about, especially the formal aspects of it, the risk mapping or the risk data sheets, writing down the controls, drafting the protocols. So when there is a risk committee, nobody's happy to attend it, because it is a very startling, and people are afraid of it. So the good side of the silver lining is that we had a big earthquake in 2010, and we had a big loss with damages of $530 million. So we had a big loss. I still have the copy of a check in my office. So the premium went up dramatically, and we had to have a lot of retention in order to have to keep the coverage, because afterwards we had a fire at our site in Arauco. So people realized that, well, since we had deductible of 20 million euros, and since the premium went up 3 times in a row, people started to realize, oh, well, it's not just okay to have an insurance because insurance will pay everything, will pay for everything. No, we have to keep working every day to reduce the risk standard and to increase the formality of the risk committees. So we have implemented governance best practices of the risks management in the company. So we have started a control system, and then we give it a score. And since we assign every risk to a person so that they feel responsible for them. So if something fails, they know they are responsible, among others. And well, it was easy to convince them to accept that and to do that, because we had a lot of catastrophes in previous years. So of course you cannot prevent an earthquake or a loss, but you can work on getting a speedy recovery of the losses, the systems, the IT systems. Of course, nobody has time to waste to start drafting a business continuity plan or a contingency plan. But if you realize that the risk is real, you start paying more attention to it. So for us, the challenge lies in the maturity model of risk management. So as I see it, in recent years we have evolved from being insurance buyers or insurance renewers, and we have evolved into being insurance managers. So the insurance is now part of the risk control plan. So it's no longer just part of the insurance department, it is part of everything. We have mining industry, so we have environmental and reputational risks, and that have a very hard impact on the kind of risks that can be covered by insurance premiums. So if they are not well identified, we are fully exposed. Another complexity in our operations is that since we carry out operations in 4 different countries with 4 different cultures and regions, different regions within those countries, makes it very difficult to really have a golden standard for the cooperation that we can escalate to the managers. And that has been a challenging task in recent years. The company is focused on operational efficiency, and we have been leading the operational strategy, but now we have to convey this to the rest of companies so that they can see us as partners in handling risk. And I agree with Gianfranco, the experience that we learned from ratios is the most valued one. We had a ratio of 5.5% until last year, but then we had heavy rains last year, and the ratio changed. And everybody remembers when there is a big loss and the big claim, but we don't want to be just that. We prefer to remember how well we are in preventing the problems and the losses for our company. So that's the big challenge.
Bien, gracias.
So, the main topic of this international workshop is excellence in operational and strategic handling of international risks. So you are very big insurance companies. You're a big client to us. You're big clients. So how do you see the operational excellence, and what recommendations, what piece of advice would you give to us insurers? Guillermo? So yesterday when we were listening to the presentations and the opening session, you were talking about the customer orientation, customer focus. And you stress that everything you do is for the client, to the clients. I think that's important because the customer is the beginning, the middle, and the end of everything you do. And that creates for very important opportunities and big opportunities, because in the end, an insurance is a critical part in the risk cycle of a company. And companies such as MAPFRE can really generate proposals and value by working hand in hand with us. In the case of aviation, aviation is an industry that is much specialized, highly regulated, and you have been with us all the time. But maybe you can get deeper into the daily operation of our business, and you can really understand our business better. And with your expertise, we can handle more value, we can generate more knowledge transfer, and we can work more hand in hand together, so that organizations such as us can organize things better every time, not just every time we have to renew the policy, but all the time. I want to give you an example. We work on seemingly simple topics, but for example, you can imagine that every crash or every dent an aircraft suffers is worth millions of dollars. So maybe we can learn from best practices by other companies in order to mitigate the risk of suffering a dent or a crash or a hit or a shock on an aircraft. Maybe we can learn from others in a proactive way instead of waiting for the risks to appear or to become true or to materialize. And I think we can work hand in hand, and that's a win-win situation. We win because we are the beneficiaries, the clients, but you win too because you get closer to your client. Thank you. Well, of course, we can always work on improving the internal procedures, for example, receiving the policies fast and error-free, and so that losses, well, that claims and damages are paid promptly. I think you can also improve your engineering visits, the interaction when one of your engineers go and visit a site. That's important for the prioritization of investment, so that you will get to know our business, our sites, our companies, and the recommendations that you make would have more sense, instead of demotivating the company when we're trying to improve our quality standards in terms of safety and security. And also maybe you can create an accident benchmark. If you have a high deductible, probably you will have fewer incidents that are really conveyed to the insurance company. If you could, for example, if we could all share with you the near fires, the near accidents, we could mitigate the risk even more. Technical risks or technical management is important, and MAPFRE makes an effort to really accompany us and to really give us support, as very few companies do. You lead the initiative, you can visit our sites, you come to get to know us, and we like you coming to our sites. The operations people need partners with your technical expertise that can bring recommendations to the table. But we see, nevertheless, to really make we really need more customized recommendations. I think you need to really do that in order to become real partners in our business. But we do recognize in MAPFRE that technical expertise, that technical interest in knowing us, in knowing what to do. In terms of efficiency, it is important to know all the elements, all the links in the insurance chain, plus the diversification, the diversity among countries, which makes it very difficult to align all the links. But it is important to do so, to align the processes, even if we all have our specificities. It is true that the diversity makes some processes lengthy. So we acknowledge that, and I think you've been working on the improvement of those deficiencies, but we need more. Thank you. Well, digitization, technological transformation, innovation, how do you see the future of your roles as risk managers in the future? How do you think they will evolve? How do you think the risks will be in the future? What do you think they will be like? Well, as the Avianca CEO, who retired a month ago, used to say that his vision of this business was to have a digital company flying planes. It was an interesting concept because in the end we are a company that is fully customer oriented, but we are predominantly digital. Aircrafts today are the epitome of technology. We know our customers through technological platforms. We want to make your life easier so that you can fly safely, efficiently, and we do that by constantly interacting with new technological solutions. Of course, when we make such a decision, and we started becoming more and more digital, we started opening doors that we have to revise from time to time because there's the risk of cybersecurity. The cyber risk is linked to the new regulations. We also have to pay attention to the new regulations, strict regulations with heavy fines, data privacy, protection of credit card data, and controls. In order to comply, for example, with the SOX for the New York Stock Exchange, so we have to work constantly on the risk identification of all of our apps, platforms, websites. And information security is now more important. And that goes hand in hand with you, or can go hand in hand with you, with the insurance industry. Because once we have identified that one of our risks is the cyber risk, or the risks that I have just mentioned, technological obsolescence that is more and more obvious. Everything goes faster now and creates more vulnerability, so it is critical for us to explore the alternatives for mitigation and within us, and also by transferring some of the risks by leveraging on you. It is a very complex challenge. We have planes such as the 787, which is fully technological, who could land on its own, who could do many things on its own. It's based on technology. And of course, we have implemented information security programs to protect our aircrafts because we want to mitigate the risks that can arise from the use of this new technology, for example, with the latest technology driven aircraft.
Gianfranco? Yes. All companies are trying to walk the path of digital transformation. For instance, forestry companies or mining companies that could be less susceptible to this because we have trees or we have mines, we cannot digitalize that. But at a certain point, the exponentiality of change runs you over, so you need to do it. So we've started that path and we're transforming from a digital point of view. But I would like to focus on digital revolution with regard to the minimization of risk. We have forest fires and we have forest plantations, and in 2011 we had a huge forest fire. It burned about 400,000 hectares, and we had 72,000 hectares that were burned, a loss of 180 million, and the insurance only covered up to 50 million. We had never had a problem with this policy in 20 years' time because these fires, they did not never reach $15 million. So we realized that our insurance, it was not good for us because it did not correlate with the expense. And second, we realized that we needed to fight fires better. We usually fight about 2,500 forest fires a year. That is 25 a day with helicopters and forest brigades, etc. We realized that our strategy was not good enough. And so we took all the data that we had from 10 years' time, 2,500 forest fires a year, as I said, and we calculated what type of helicopters came, how long it took for them to arrive. So we worked with an Australian company, Cesaro, and they told us that our strategy to fight these forest fires, it was wrong. Instead of arriving at 25 minutes after the forest fire began, we need to do it a bit later, but with the whole patrol. And we changed our strategy thanks to this. We took only 20 minutes, but with all of the resources in place. Now, in 2018, 2019, we had the same amount of forest fires, but they only burned 100 hectares approximately, so it was a big win. And then we changed our insurance as well. We were the first world company to have a parametric insurance for forestry and the forest sector. So now, instead of checking what happened after each forest fire and really analyzing everything and waiting for the money to come, now every X amount of days we take photos with satellite. We had an automatic liquidity, and every X days we see how much it has been burned, and then we get our money back. We don't have just one deductible, and it was a revolution, and we've managed to use technology and algorithms in order to fight these forest fires. We had a very good year this year, not many forest fires, so we haven't really made the most of it, fortunately, but we are aligning the cost of technology and the cost of our forest fires, and it is a really good technology, and we can most efficiently transfer this risk. As a group, we've focused a lot, because of this operational efficiency, towards automatization. Now we can manage our plants and have every information available online from our remote control area to see what is happening. I would say that our company does not need such a strong digitalization, but that does not mean that we are not facing some risk regarding cybersecurity. We have strong strength in mining sector towards having those automated lorries that have tons of product without a driver, because we've been researching a lot about fatigue control on the pilot. For instance, we've done studies on the position of the head, position of the eye, to see whether they're falling asleep or not, and that creates an automatic alert. So we think that in a few years these will all be automated, and we'll probably won't need lorry drivers anymore. At present now, we've been working on the digitalization part, especially on this management of lorries. Now we have a control where we can see the GPS location on the lorry, the load, in which point they're going to cross paths with another lorry, because they have a lot of tons of produce, and so if they crash, it would be a catastrophe, these two lorries. So we have this digitalization on one hand, we have also databases, but we do not have many clients. We only have a handful of clients who buy our production in copper. And we do not have a magic wand to make things work, because we work with copper, as I said. And so for us, this database, they're not a big risk, but we need to protect them anyway. Just yesterday, I read a report that said that 54% of mining companies, they have been victims of a cyber attack last year, from different sources probably. So there have been some attempts in our company to get into our servers, and we have had some hacking happening because they were asking for some money in order to release the data. So sometimes we have done things manually on the administrative part, especially. But in the automation, we see that we are a bit at risk because it's really important for us in order to manage production. So we need to focus on that. Thank you. Let us now talk about the market, the insurance market. We are changing trends now in the market. We talk about change of strategy in insurance companies. We are now having big brokers handling big clients, and all of these changes could entail differences for risk handlers because they need to adapt to the new situation. So how is this moment going, or what is like for you? The way that we have analyzed is this. We need to manage to change the way that we manage insurance and losses and claims. In the organization I work for, I believe that for the past few years we have done a permanent management together with the insurance sector. So we are improving our premium year after year, and at the end of the day what we see is that this is not something that is sustainable. That is, they cannot go down and down and down this premium to go down to zero. But at the same time, we see that this is not the real nature of the organization. That is, we do not have policies in order to accept all of the way that insurance and policies work. So that made us think about what was the control model or the insurance model, the compliance and the risk model that we wanted to have in our organization. Just so you understand what I mean, a few years ago when we had an event materializing, and in aviation sector that is every day, loss of theft of a baggage or an accident with a plane or a problem with a passenger, then we used to call the insurance company to say, well, there has been a theft in a baggage, so come and see what happened. So we thought, well, if these areas that are really handling it, if they're not feeling responsible for handling the risk, then what are we doing? Because it's about culture. If you have some baggage loss and you do nothing but just call the insurance company, then that doesn't work. So we changed our model, and before it was different areas that alerted on security and safety risk. Now we have instead people taking responsibility for their actions. So we are still amidst a process of change. I think we need a couple more years to really implement it. So now the areas are much more engaged with their own risks. So it's not just about that having an impact on policies. Before, in the aviation sector, we had some problems and really understanding what insurance was like. We just activated the policy by ringing the company, and then that was it, because we would receive the money and that's it, you continue with your day-to-day work. But this is changing. And I think what we need to achieve is to really understand what insurance is like, which is just one more tool in order to manage risk. But of course we need to change the way that we manage it, how we sell this management on policies. So it's not just about negotiating better prices for the premium, but rather for our organization to mitigate, to learn, to change risks, and understand that if in the future they materialize, then that is not a problem. And that's one of the challenges that we have ahead of us. Let's hope that we will fulfill it. Sometimes we see it's difficult, but we need to break some paradigms. We need to make changes in our culture within our organizations in order to achieve that. Thank you, Guillermo. Gianfranco next. Interest rates go up, and then these insurance, sometimes they do not work because investors go elsewhere. I'm a CEO of the company, and so I understand that. I laugh at the fact that banks sometimes they tell me, well, interest rates are going up, but they have been going down, down, down. Now they're going up a little bit, but the economy is not as strong, and now long interest rates, they're going down a little bit. So insurance market is something that we will see how it will behave in the next few years. If we see that the capability has been reduced, the advantage is to keep it. If you're okay with the way that you manage risk, then try to keep it. Try to contain the deductibles and the expenses. We had a high number of losses. But Arauco has been really going strong. We've been buying companies in Europe and in the United States. And so what we have insured, it's bigger and bigger each year. So we were attractive, so to speak, with regard to these insurance companies. So if the market is mature and if we are confident with our deductible, then let us keep our insurance. I think having a higher retention, then that's good, because we get used to the insurance company not paying for everything, and so we manage risk better. I believe that as risk managers, at present we're going through a change, and that is something that we live on our daily basis as risk handlers. And this is because of the change in the insurance company. Now there is a toughening up of different conditions, and there have been some high increases in policies prices. So the task of the risk handler means that he has more and more responsibilities. In the past few years, we've always managed to get better prices or better conditions, but this year on, we're seeing that things are changing a little bit more. And being very transparent, I would like to say that it has been very easy to, so to say, do a good job and to really pat our backs and saying, well, we've done a great management of risk, we are saving, but that has changed now. And now we need to change our strategy as well, because now we need more creative strategy, like risk transfer, for instance. We're increasing our level of deductible, so we need to increase our retentions, our risk financial retention systems, or the captive system is something that is really resounding in our company in the past few weeks, because we know that the situation is becoming more and more complicated, and we really do not know how long this cycle will last for. So this is a real challenge that, as my colleagues have said, that's something that is happening right now. And so now it is difficult to make the direction understand what is happening, because they are outside of these insurance companies. Because the direction of these companies, they've really understood that we were companies who were good partners to have, and now they do not quite understand what is happening, and so now they think that we are not doing our job right. So I think the challenge for the next few months will be precisely to be able to retain or to better manage our risks. Thank you. To finish, I would like for you to share some experience of your activity that could be shared for other sectors. So what are some of the best practices that you could share? Well, I don't know if this is an experience, but I'd like to share this. In our company, in this globalized world we live in, I was listening to what Ricardo was saying and Gianfranco, and the main concerns or the perspective that we should have from the risk management, it's of global nature. One of the learnings that we've managed to have, like for instance the situation with the Boeing 737 MAX, that fortunately we do not have that plane in our ranks, but that means that we need to manage and identify risk far beyond our borders, because we're talking about global risks. In our case, for instance, the 737 MAX 2 accidents and those that are now grounded, that meant for us that the next negotiation will be a very complex one. So we need to open our minds, We need to see what are the trends and the risks, but at global level. We cannot just look at what's happening in our market or in our country. Rather, we need to see the world as a whole and to see how these issues could directly affect us in our industry, regardless of what our company is like. Gianfranco, any experience? Well, I would like to repeat what I just said. Do not be afraid to go to your insurance company and to suggest a difference, because as forest industry, we went there and we tried to tell them what was our problem and find a win-win solution, or at least to find a new solution. Our parametrical solution was for agriculture, but not for forest sector. And so I think this is an idea that could be expanded to other markets. So do not just look at the markets that are right there. Just look at the bigger picture and discuss it with your insurance company. In my experience, one of the best practices or strategy that we have implemented is to communicate with the markets closely and to communicate with the insurance and reinsurance companies, not just with the intermediate or the broker. Rather, we need to make negotiations easier, especially now when the technical requirements are more and more important. So we see that the know-how or a meeting or going or meeting them in our company or in theirs, that goes a long way for us. And that way they can see how we manage risks. Well, thank you all. It has been very interesting. And with this, we conclude our first roundtable of the second day. Thank you.